Have you ever checked out a game and when you finish it you're so impressed by it that it leaves you in awe and you start questioning your game purchases and asking yourself, why did I take so long to play this? I have no idea why. It just so happens that after completing Detention, that's exactly how I feel. If you have a game that left you feeling the same, let me and the others know down below in the comments so that some of these underrated titles can get the love and appreciation that they truly deserve. If you're familiar with Detention, you've heard of the comparisons to Silent Hill. And it's for good reason. This is a profound horror game, and it is shockingly well written. The simplest way I can describe Detention's story arc is like this. When you begin the game, it's as if you're playing Silent Hill 4. But by the end, it's as if you're playing Silent Hill 2. If you have a penchant for horror titles, you don't need me to tell you that that's a good thing. It starts off as a survival horror game with paranormal elements, but by the end it's a beautiful, psychological horror trip that takes you on a wild roller coaster ride of emotions and existential dread. I feel like this description perfectly encapsulates the simplest way for me to express how I feel about it, but I also feel like that particular way of describing it makes it sound like a Silent Hill clone, and therefore selling it short. And that's exactly why I want to delve deeper. Detention is much more than just a Silent Hill clone. In a lot of ways it's different and incredibly special in its own way. Hi there folks, this is Rayven. Today I'm bringing you the review for quite a bit of a gem of a horror game, Detention. This is a story-driven game developed by Taiwanese studio Red Candle, and while I wish nothing more than to keep it spoiler-free, I feel like talking around the story instead of addressing it directly is only doing the game and Red Candle a disservice. If you're someone who cares about the storytelling side of video games as much as I do, and would love to join me as I analyze it, break it down, and gush over how much I enjoyed the little details everywhere, I'd appreciate if you stick around till the end of the video. However, I do understand if you want to avoid spoilers. Feel free to click off this video at the given timestamp. I'll even go as far as to say go ahead and buy the game already. If you're someone who thinks a good story-driven game can get away with other things as long as the story delivers, then this is an easy buy. And who knows, maybe you want to come back and watch the rest of the video once you've finished it. And even if not, thank you for simply watching this video. If you happen to have found a game that you enjoyed today, feel free to drop a like on this video to help it reach other people who might just be as interested. With that out of the way, let's get started. Detention is a 2D side-scroller survival horror game set in Greenwood High School, Taiwan, taking place in the 1960s and based on a real-time period called the White Terror, when Taiwan was under martial law. You play as Greenwood student Wei Chung, having just woken up in a classroom with nobody there, and it just so happens there's a typhoon outside, and you slept all day. Wei's exit is through the auditorium. In here, he finds another student, Fang Ray Shin, or simply Ray, sleeping on a chair smack dab in the middle of the stage. He wakes her up. Before the two set out to leave, Ray insists on finding her lost necklace. Wei finds this necklace in the small room next to the stage, and then they leave the auditorium. Unfortunately, the bridge is out and the river below it is blood red. Ray indeed thinks that it's blood. On the other hand, Wei tries to rationalize what he's seeing, telling her that it was most likely chemicals that have been tossed into the river. Whether it was blood or not, it surely was a dead end. Having run out of options, the two decide to hole up back in the classroom. After some time getting to know each other, Wei gets the idea to use the school's only telephone to contact someone for help. Ray stays behind and Wei heads out into the dark, foreboding corridors, all alone. Wei never reaches the phone. The screen gets interrupted and a weird, rapid display of imagery plays out. The game then cuts back to the auditorium. However, this time, you take over as Ray. It turns out Wei is just the character for the prologue. The real protagonist of this story is Ray. This is where the game truly starts to shine. Greenwood High School is a dark, sick, twisted place that Ray will struggle to escape from, solving all kinds of simple but interesting puzzles. While almost none of these puzzles will leave you scratching your head like some confused Neanderthal, they will most certainly leave you intrigued by their cryptic nature. Not once did a puzzle feel like it was padding out the runtime. On the contrary, I don't remember a single puzzle that doesn't foreshadow something right under one's nose or drives the plot forward. In between all the rooms and the plethora of puzzles, there is usually something lurking in the dark, or maybe not in the dark, but just outside of your peripheral vision of the 2D world around you, remnants of a tragic past wandering around with no resolve. These creatures are known as the Lingered. The Lingered consist of 3 enemy types that you'll encounter, each one requiring a different method of avoidance or escape. To get past the common Lingered, Ray needs to hold her breath when she walks by. There's more tension to this mechanic than it seems. She can only move approximately 15 steps before running out of breath, and it's not clear how close she can get before she needs to start doing so. 15 steps sounds like a lot, but when you have to creep by this painstakingly slow, and that the enemies can patrol around either towards or away from you, it's really not that much. Then you have the tall and slender type called a Lantern Spectre. They're far more imposing and one wrong move results in an instant death, but on the bright side they're easier to get past. Again, you do need to hold your breath and also look away this time, but the timing required to use the mechanic on the Lantern Spectres is actually quite forgiving. The last enemy type is... I actually have no idea what that is. It's just a giant blob of human appendages, I guess, that are strictly limited to some scripted chase sequences. Overall, the enemy encounters are pretty bare bones in terms of gameplay depth, but that doesn't detract from how effective they are at creating tension. Sound design adds a whole new other layer to the tension building. The soundscape is quite reminiscent of Silent Hill in a lot of ways. There's this beautiful lo-fi quality to everything that I genuinely appreciate, from the radio static to worn and torn piano keys, the ghostly cries of those who are yearning, even to the gritty industrial sounds in some of the music tracks. Much like the series it draws inspiration from, the sound design successfully captures that rusty quality, feeling otherworldly and ethereal in its delivery. As much as it is all of these things, the game is also a master of the art of using silence as an integral part of the horror experience. What's different about Detention is that most of the silence stems from the lack of voice acting. Minimalistic or even absent voice work is a common practice in indie games, allowing the developers to save money that is best used elsewhere. What's impressive about this game is not just how it works around this limitation, but instead uses it to its advantage and makes it feel like it was an artistic choice more than anything else. So how does Detention use silence as a means to elevate the horror experience? Well then, let me ask you a question. What other form of media lacks dialogue, compensates with music, has lo-fi audio, and is creepy in a way words cannot describe? I have 2 words for you. Silent movies. What? It can't just be me. Okay, here's why I made this connection. I believe there's 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is that we as humans see patterns. We are hardwired to feel unsettled when something doesn't fall under a familiar pattern that we recognize. When it comes to text replacing actual speech in any given fiction of horror, the actual absence of speech or yelling for help goes against our pattern as a social species to call out for help of others. And I think that subconsciously this fear of not recognizing that pattern carries over when we sit down and interact with a horror game. The second reason as to why I think I'm making this connection is because both this game and silent movies share another weird and unsettling pattern. Back in the old days, silent films would be shot at a frame rate that is slower than the frame rate at which it gets projected, causing the actors to have this weird, unnatural looking movement and overall sense of speed. Detention doesn't exactly use this method to create that disturbing illusion of character movement, but it does seem to use its art style to create a similar effect. There seems to be this lack of harmony between the backgrounds and the characters. It has this sense of dissonance, almost as if it's deliberate, between the player character and their surroundings, creating this idea that the characters might not be part of the world in which they inhabit. Therefore, it might mean that they could be in a dream, or in this case, the worst nightmare of their lives. And it really helps to reinforce reinforced the otherworldly and ethereal impression you get from the sound design. The art style for the characters seemed to resemble paper cutouts, as if to propose this idea that the characters are like puppets floating by as the story manipulates them to live out their life story against their own terms, without any agency or autonomy in regards to their destiny. This is an interesting observation I've come across on a particular review. It really opened my eyes to the nuance that Red Candle Games truly strived for, and I highly recommend you check it out. And when thinking about how this story actually pans out, I honestly believe that this hypothesis is spot on. And from there, I'd like to segue into the story analysis. If you wish to experience Ray's compelling journey the way the developers intended, this is your spoiler warning. The plot twist is simply wonderful, and I implore you to experience it for yourself, and let it sink in for a bit first before I break the story down and share my thoughts as to why I think it resonated with me so much. Granted, it's only been about a week since I finished Detention, but this game still has me pondering, living in the back of my mind rent-free, and I have a seriously strong feeling that, much like the tragic characters and the spirits inhabiting its game world, Detention's poetical prowess and tragically told story will linger in my mind. Okay, that was a bad pun. I'll see myself out. For a long, long, long time. The truth is, the survival horror in Detention is just a facade. There's no survival because you can't survive. While Ray is indeed trying to escape Greenwood High School, she's not trying to get out alive. She is simply trying to go somewhere else. The truth is, Ray is dead. She has been for a very long time. 15 years, actually. So what is she escaping from? Well, what Ray wants to escape from is her guilt. What the player gets to witness from Ray's obscure starting point all the way to her heartbreaking end is an endless loop of regrets, not all of them grounded in the real world, but instead confined to her imagination and her fallible thoughts as to what might have transpired after her death, making her a severely unreliable narrator. For most of her life, Ray was a victim of circumstances and downward mental health spirals she had no control over, an innocent, corrupted by an oppression that permeates every single part of her life. Her family, social circles, hobbies, love life, education, her mental well-being, so on and so forth. Ray was a bright student at Greenwood whose academic achievements started plummeting the minute that family problems started to arise. As an only child to a loyal housewife and a family man with drinking problems, Ray had to witness the downfall of her one sacred space and her loved ones within it. We can all imagine how terrible this is for someone to go through in this day and age. Every last one of us, let alone in that time period and part of history. What you and I can imagine Ray going through, even for a fictional character, is only a fraction of what we can comprehend. It doesn't matter if she's not a real person, because the time period was indeed real. And the possibility of that even happening in real life, that thought alone should have you terrified. And that's not even the end of it. Eventually, Ray's mother gets her revenge on the father, and he ends up in prison. Oof, talk about escalating quickly. Yes, the mother hired a private investigator, and sometime later, the father indeed ended up in jail. It seems as if the PI found so much dirt on the father that he could make a Minecraft shovel look like a cleaning detergent. In the midst of all of this, Ray starts going to the school counselor for help, but instead ends up on the creepiest Tinder date and relationship of all time. Well, that's not creepy at all. Said nobody on the 21st of never. Now, make no mistake, this is deplorable behavior, and it's good that reviewers acknowledge that fact. Absolutely, without a doubt. But at the same time, I cannot help but wonder if that aspect of the relationship between Ray and Mr. Chang got in the way of what it was trying to add to the story. I'm not saying you should be okay with it, but as a reviewer, one has to ask themselves, what is the game trying to say with this? Why is this in the game? Is it simply gratuitous and self-indulgent, or is there a reason behind the inclusion of such a subplot? And if the answer was the former, I would 100% agree with you. But every time I try to answer that question for myself, I always come to the conclusion that it is indeed the latter and not the former. First things first, there's the cultural aspect. The game's a narrative vessel above all else, a golden opportunity for developers to present a window into their indigenous history with the rest of the world, and the reality of the horrors that came with such time periods. While I did find the relationship pretty appalling, I think that was the point. Even when Ray eavesdrops on a conversation one time between Miss Yin and Mr. Cheng, Miss Yin does indeed question Mr. Cheng's irresponsible ways, and his response was so comically stereotypical that there's no way I could imagine the game's overall narrative to be siding with him. In a title like this, where the whole point seems to be a commentary about how unjust the White Terror truly was to these people, where despicable human beings could get away with misusing their social status, oppressing others, and suppressing any form of critical thinking within a society, the idea that Mr. Cheng, someone who also misuses his status within the school hierarchy to date a student, gets glorified for doing the same thing just seems so backwards. Now, I get it, some people probably wanted more than just one line of dialogue to address this issue. However, we're talking about a game that could have easily been named Read Between the Lines that are between the lines that are in between even more lines, the video game. And it would still fit it like a glove. Games like this never tend to spell anything out to the player, and when it comes to this topic, it's just simply no different. But thanks to the eavesdrop scene, not for one second do I feel like Chang's character was written in a way that glorified his actions. I reject this hypothesis. If anything, I think there is a good case to be made that Mr. Cheng's relationship with Ray is actually supposed to mirror that of Ray's mother and father. Let me explain. In Chapter 3, it's implied in this one scene that Ray's father was negligent and became abusive to his loved ones. His woman became heartbroken by his actions and sought to get revenge for his suspected infidelity, seeking a middleman to carry out the revenge. Things do not go to plan, and the punishment goes above and beyond what was once just a simple concept of revenge. The request of vengeance blows way out of proportion, instead turning into a full-blown execution. Since Ray's father is sent to jail and is never to be seen again, you could say that, metaphorically, the mother ended up killing the father. Though to Ray's surprise, the mother is actually happy about it. Keep this in mind for now, I'll circle back to this point. Because of Mr. Cheng, Detention also happens to work as a phenomenal little tale about revenge, something that even most AAA games struggle to get right. The last two chapters imply that Mr. Cheng was negligent and abusive to his loved ones. His woman, Ray, heartbroken by his actions, sought to get revenge for his suspected infidelity and secret relationship with Miss Yin, seeking a middleman to carry out the revenge. Things do not go to plan, and the punishment goes above and beyond the concept of simply revenge. The request of vengeance blows out of proportion, turning into a full-blown execution. One could say that, quite literally, Ray ended up killing the man she loved, and to her surprise, her final source of happiness. If you feel like you've already heard these last few sentences, it's because you have. They are the exact same sentences I used about the mother's desire to exact revenge on whom she deemed unfaithful, with the exception of some words getting tweaked. Do you see a pattern emerging here? That, ladies and gentlemen, is the endless cycle of violence. The mother, oppressed by society's expectation of her to be a loyal and obedient housewife, feels trapped, stuck in her own purgatory, an infinite loop of watching the same pain and regrets over and over with each subsequent day when the father comes home reeking of alcohol and women's perfume. By the time the father gets sent away, the mother has already found the courage to forgive herself and to stop blaming herself, and it's because of this decision that she finally escapes purgatory and moves on. The cycle was then passed on to Ray when she decided to take revenge. Despite the socially unacceptable relationship, Ray actually loved Cheng. He filled a void in her life with his teachings, his endless quest to seek more knowledge, and to fight for freedom of expression and thought. Cheng also understood Ray's struggle to fit in anywhere, which is why she looked to him for solace and affection. Unfortunately, Cheng's endless pursuit for knowledge came at a cost, in the form of an illegal book club, run by himself, Miss Yin, and some of the other students, one of them being Wei. Remember the guy from the prologue? When Ray eavesdropped on a conversation between Miss Yin and Mr. Cheng, she suspected some sort of affair, and wanted Miss Yin to pay. But what Ray didn't know at the time was that Chang was also part of the book club. He kept it a secret because he didn't want to risk her life in case the club was ever exposed. And there was no affair either. Miss Yin wanted Chang to do the right thing and keep Ray at a distance for her own good. This is where Wei starts to fit into the story. The start of the game takes place on the night of the typhoon. Ray passed out on the stage after eavesdropping and Wei fell asleep in class. On that night, Ray hears about the book club. Seeing it as an opportunity to make Miss Yin pay, Ray convinces Wei to give her a copy of the book list. What she does next is go to the middleman for revenge, who happens to be Instructor Bai. Shortly after, the members of the book club get apprehended. Miss Yin and Mr. Chang get sentenced to death. Miss Yin, however, managed to flee the country, rendering Ray's desire for revenge futile. Following Chang's death, Ray's last few days took a toll on her, traumatized by the outcome and to add insult to injury gets bullied at school. Incapable of forgiving herself and accepting that she can't atone for her sins, she jumps off the school roof, ending her life. In the afterlife, Ray discovers that death was not the right answer. The answer was forgiveness. To leave purgatory, Ray has to come to terms with her past mistakes. She can never undo what she's done, but what she can do is learn from it. But 15 years have gone by, and she's never made it out. So why would this time be any different, you ask? After 15 years, something changes. An inciting incident, you could say. For 15 years, Wei suffered in his own form of imprisonment, an actual prison. He had everything taken away from him. He lost his education, his freedom of expression, the people in the book club, his mother died before he could see her again, and all that kept him going all these years was a letter from his father. As a now old and free man with nowhere to call home, Wei pays Greenwood a visit. If you got a game over screen as Ray, you'll definitely recognize this place, and this woman, who seems to be a clairvoyant. In the final chapter, Ray encounters a shadow figure of herself, telling her, "I am you, but you are not me." The Shadow Ray comes from the future. "I am you" signifies that Shadow Ray has already gone through the process of forgiving herself. "But you are not me" signifies that unlike Shadow Ray, the real Ray is not quite there yet. The Shadow presents you with a choice, leading to one of two endings, both tragic, poignant, and satisfactory. However, one outcome is undeniably better than the other. If Ray fails to answer all 4 of the Shadow's questions correctly, she is doomed to repeat her suffering and self-blame all over again and again. Luckily, that was not the true ending. To answer the Shadow correctly, Ray has to pick up the last few notes that, until now, Ray had never seen. Wei's visit to Greenwood changes everything. In the inventory, there's now a different journal, documenting his thoughts on the aftermath. The notes that Ray picked up are excerpts from his journal, allowing Ray and the player to connect the dots. In his notes, Wei expresses sorrow and regret, and is in a form of purgatory of his own. His note about Ray's tragedy changes something within Ray, and seeing him come back to face the truth and move on gives her the courage to finally do the same. And now the story has come full circle. The cycle began on the night of the typhoon, when Wei and Ray sat on opposite sides in the classroom. 15 long and painful years, and they're back to where they started. What was once an attempt at revenge disguised as a conversation has now turned into a drawn-out moment of silence. Ironically more genuine than any word could ever be. With just a look, Ray tells him that she's sorry. He cannot see her, nor can he hear her, and he can't even accept her apology. But that's okay, because in the end, it doesn't matter. What does matter is that Ray has finally accepted, ending the cycle of violence and the hurt and the misery that comes from blaming yourself. You are, and you will always be, your own worst critic. And now that you've learned your lesson, detention is over.